One. And welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We are obviously working through our IBA Sustainability Benchmarking Tool launch and our Sustainability Toolkit. My name is Martise Hooperman. I act as the project lead for the Sustainability Group and also work as the Sustainability and Logistics Manager at Bright Brewery in Northeast Victoria. Just like to introduce you to our panel of speakers today. We have Kylie Lethbridge who's the CEO of the IBA, Oliver Lovett, Senior Advisor for Sustainability in Business with the GISA, which is Green Industries South Australia, James McIntyre, General Manager for 2XE, and James Perrin from Stone & Wood, Sustainability and Community Manager. So to tick off today, if we can, we'll head over to Kylie. Kylie, if you can give a bit of a rundown on what we're launching today and the importance to the IBA and its members.
Thanks, Matisse, and thanks everybody else for either logging on or joining us at a later date. I'm going to be super quick because this is all about hearing about our new tool and best practice guide for sustainability. So firstly, though, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our Sustainability Project Group, who has worked tirelessly on the development of this program over the last 12 months. And to Oliver and his team at GISA, who supported, I guess, a vision to look for a more sustainable brewing industry and how we could be involved in either supporting or leveraging those opportunities. So thanks to the South Australian Government for trusting us with their funds. Of course, to 2XE, who are the experts in this space, and we engaged to develop this project with us. Due to COVID, we're probably about 3 or 4 months later than what we wanted to be, but from our perspective, start of the journey. It's a tool that we will own and will continue to develop over time. We've already identified a number of ways in which we could use this in ways, and we'll continue to work with 2XE to look at those opportunities. Before I finish up and hand over for the exciting bit, I just wanted to acknowledge and send the greatest shout out to James Perrin, who you can see on your screen right now. James has led our sustainability group from its inception and has not missed a beat the whole way through this last 18 months, which has been very challenging for most people. So James, thank you so much, and we will miss you from the group, and we wish you the very best in all your next endeavours in the sustainability space. So big shout out to James, and I'll hand back over to you.
Excellent, thank you, Kylie. Also just like to iterate to those that have logged on today, if you have any questions throughout our presentation today, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll respond to those towards the end of the session, and we'll cover those off. James, once again, thank you very much for your involvement with the group this year. It's been fantastic. It would be great if you could run us through a bit of an overview of how the tool came about and why it is so important to our members to be able to interact with it and get some benefit from it.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Martise and Kylie, for those wonderful words. That was really nice to hear. So yeah, I guess I'll just quickly step back and talk about the formation of the sustainability group and how we've led to what we're rolling out today. And I'm also mindful that, I'll acknowledge that I'm with Stone & Wood, and Stone & Wood are no longer a member of the IBA. And it's just really nice that I've been able to be invited on this just to provide this context as we transition from me to Martise with this group, and you guys are going to take this completely to the next level. So I'm very grateful to be involved in this today. So yeah, the formation of the Sustainability Project Group really came about pretty much 2 years ago at BrewCon 2019, before all hell broke loose. And it was really just around a group of a group of representatives of different breweries wanting to get together and work on industry-wide sustainability initiatives. And we really didn't know what we were going to work on to start with, but it was just around how do we form a group and start to put some stuff down on paper on what we need to do. And very quickly we realized, we started to talk about ideas. Is it supply chain? Is it, you know, where's our focus best spent? And we realized very quickly that particularly for IBA members, particularly for smaller and medium-sized members, just getting an understanding of their resource use was critical. Water, electricity, gas, waste. A lot of breweries don't have the tools or resources or ability to measure a lot of these things. So we started to put that intention out there. We wrote down on the IBA website, on our sustainability project group website, what some of our goals and initiatives were around that. And it was a bit of a, if you build it, they will come situation, where once we got that out there, we started to have conversations, and 2xe and Giza kind of materialized and said, hey, there's an opportunity here for us to collaborate on something. So what came about was we really looked to the Brewers Association in America for a bit of guidance. They've got some really great tools and resources for breweries, their members, to tap into around resource use and some benchmarking spreadsheets. And we said, okay, well, what can we develop that's a similar thing for the Australia-New Zealand industry? And this is where we landed. So essentially what the scope was for this project was we want to have a tool or some sort of way for breweries to input their resource use and monitor and track their own resource use over time, so that they can, once they measure and monitor it, they can improve upon it over time. 2, for them to compare their use to other members, other breweries, so they know whether what they're doing is good or not, how they're comparing to the industry. And then 3, give them some opportunities to improve, some guidance. So what are some good practice examples? What are some ways, if their water is out of water use, for example, is higher than the industry average, what can they do about it? So that was kind of the scope, and the other people on this call will take you through where we've landed. But I just wanted to kind of paint that picture of how it started, what we're launching today, and I'm really excited to see it roll out for the industry.
And so this tool, obviously, James, has great application to businesses large and small. It's not so much, you don't need to be a Stone and Wood with huge turnover and big volumes of production. You can also be a family-owned brewery or winery and make use of this particular toolkit to tweak or even just realize what things you could potentially do for your business to make yourself more sustainable in that space. Totally.
Even Stone and Wood, for the last however many years, I've been tracking all this through a big old Excel spreadsheet internally, and it's been a not very well functioning tool. And I haven't had the ability to compare and understand where we place compared to the Australian industry. You know, we've got some numbers on other breweries around the world, but we haven't really had proper numbers on our industry and how we operate here. So this is all new, and this is going to be valuable to businesses big and small.
Yeah. So I guess the thing to iterate to some of our viewers that are logging on today is that have a look at the tool as it's been developed. James will run us through some examples on how to enter your data. It's made as simple as possible so that people can start using it and actually get some ways of benchmarking themselves against other similar sized breweries or wineries. So excellent. Thank you for that, James. Cutting over to our James McIntyre now from 2xe. James, you've obviously built the tool and with input from the sustainability group over the last 2 years. Love you to run us through it and give us some examples of how our members can engage with it.
No problems at all. Thank you very much for that. And look, we started this journey over a year ago, and due to the joys of COVID and BrewCon postponement, it's taken a while, but we're there now. So it's great to be releasing this to the wider group. Look, just first up, there are quite a few people to thank, and first up, I'd like to thank JP Media, who are our developers they've done all the IT work to put this tool together and ongoing marketing for us. Giza, thank you, Ollie, so much for funding this and for your ongoing support to help projects like this happen. It's so important. So thank you very much. IBA, Kylie, thank you. Keeping this going, connecting us with the right people. and your tenacity for keeping this going too. So thank you in some very trying times. And also, of course, Kelly and Luke for your wonderful work, as always, for your organisation, the design work, webinars, discussions, etc. And it's just been nice to kick back and forth with you both. Also like to thank a lot of the local SA Brewers and the IBA Sustainability Committee. And these are the guys who have provided the data and feedback for the tool and the guide. And this is where we get the benchmark. This is where we've got the preliminary benchmark data from. Special thank you again to James Perrin and Martise. Really couldn't have done it without you guys. So thank you very much for the feedback that you've had so far. Cheers, guys. Okay, so look, let's get into it. Look, my name's James McIntyre. I'm the GM for 2XE. 2XE, as a whole, we work with businesses, industry associations, councils, governments to help try and drive sustainability across Australia. And look, sustainability really is important, especially today. Sustainability is really, it's about meeting our own needs without compromising the needs for future generations. And it's about making a change to our day-to-day lives that has a positive impact on society, environment, community, and more important, the economy. So look, recently we've all had to make changes to our day-to-day lives due to the impact of COVID. And this is proof that we really can make meaningful changes to our own lives and behavior for the future. Look, in addition to that, sustainability just makes good business sense. Meeting customer needs while consuming fewer resources, operating more effectively while preparing for the future. These are some of the changes that we get to make. It's not that we're forced to make, it's we've got the opportunity now to jump on board with it. So look, I'll just start off and talk about why the benchmark tool and sustainability guide came about from our perspective. Personally, I've worked with a lot of businesses in the food, wine, brewing space, manufacturing space, councils, governments. I feel really old right now. Working with these businesses, a lot of this has been one-on-one, working with industry associations. A lot of it has been about sustainability, process efficiency, energy efficiency. A lot at the moment, because it's a hotspot, is being carbon neutral. So we're doing so much work for that. For many of these businesses, it's hard to keep meeting demand. And the reason that it keeps on hard to meeting demand is because demand keeps on increasing. You guys probably know more than anyone else, anyone who's watching this, that we're making some great beers right now, and demand just keeps on increasing. We get away from some of the, I guess, probably the traditional beers and onto some amazing craft beers. Demand keeps growing, and so you've got a choice. You have to figure out how your process is going to change to meet those needs. So so a lot of it is about growth planning for the future while improving sustainability. So that's part of the crucial part. So about 5 years ago, we developed a similar benchmark tool and sustainability guide for the wine industry. So the sustainability guide for the wine industry is still in use today. It was the Wine Energy Saver Toolkit. Actually, that was closer to 10 years ago now, but still quite relevant. And the benchmarking tool that's been since absorbed into AWRI, it's the Australian Wine Research Institute, the Sustainable Wine Growing Program, which has been good because we've been able to take what we've learnt from the wine industry and apply that to the brewing industry without a lot of the research that went into it. So that's a big bonus for us. So based on the companies I've worked with, there's one thing that's constant. You'll get a similar output in terms of quality, production, volume, or the product, but totally different inputs in terms of energy, water, waste, labor. And the one thing that always comes down to it, this is the way we do things, which is great. But if the final product is almost the same, which way is best? What's the best method? And so that's where sustainability comes into play, is how do you know if you're performing well? How do you know if you're not performing well? Up until now, there hasn't been a lot of industry benchmarks in the brewing industry for the Australian brewing industry. Based on the preliminary work we've done so far, we're actually a lot more water efficient than American breweries, and that might just be a reflection that we're particularly dry in Australia. But again, this is a very low subset of data that we'll have to get more of. But The other thing that I've noticed is the big difference between the wine industry and the brewing industry is how dynamic the brewing industry is. It's almost always in a state of change or growth. And I've never seen an industry move so fast as when brewers switched from kegs to cans during COVID. So I think this is probably one of the times right now is, using the sustainability tool and benchmarking tool is get the right data so that we can make the right changes. So that's enough about sustainability. Now I want to talk a little bit more about the tool. So there's two components to the benchmark tool. So there's the first, you've got the sustainability, you've got the benchmarking tool. So that's a web-based platform. And then you've got the sustainability guide. Again, it's a web-based. You can get it web-based and keep it if you want, potentially download it if you want as well. So there's also two parts to the benchmarking tool itself. The first is generating your own performance metrics. And as James was saying before, this is about, figuring out how, it's not more than just how much electricity am I using per month. It's how much electricity am I using per month per production of beer. So that's something that becomes fairly important and it's collecting that data so that you can figure out what your own performance metrics are. And that's what these are called, performance metrics. So how many liters of water per liter of beer you produce. So what we do is in the benchmark is you input all this data and these are normalized or adjusted based on your production volume. So what this does is it allows you to track performance. So if you have a high production month or a low production month, it allows you to normalize these values so you can still compare apples with apples. So that's the first part is benchmarking your own performance month on month. And the second part is using these performance metrics, your own performance metrics, to compare your performance with breweries of a similar size and operation. Now we talked about similar size and operation. Now that's basically our comparison criteria. So every brewery is different. Larger breweries are generally more efficient than smaller breweries. Currently in the benchmark tool, because we've got good data. The data that's in there is great, but we need more data sets. We've got a dozen or so data sets over, for each month. But the more data sets we get, the more precise the data can get, and the change in comparison criteria we can create. So at the moment, we've got a split into small, medium, large, extra large breweries. So we've got a range of that. So you'll basically be comparing yourself in this lot or that lot, depending on how much beer you're producing. Now, that's not the only criteria. As you can imagine, if you've got a solar system, then you're going to be performing very differently from a brewery that doesn't have a solar system. If you're running an electric brew versus a gas brew, things are going to be different. If you've got a venue attached to your brewery, then again, performance is going to be very different. So the more data that we can get and the more participants that we can get, the better we can create, the better the data set is that we can create. And so you can do your comparison.
And James, this can also apply to businesses that have multiple sites. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And for those businesses, that's a good point. I wouldn't be looking at, I wouldn't try and combine both your breweries into one brewery and say we're doing this. I'd actually use that to compare brewery A to brewery B of my own brewery and go, which one's working better? So yeah, so you can definitely use multiple sites. For those of you who are lucky enough to have multiple breweries, it sounds like the dream. But yeah. So that's a very good point. Now, as I said, the benchmark database is still growing. So we've got a limited data set at the moment. It's robust, but it's limited. We want more and more. As we get more participants, the benchmark will become more precise, and that's where we really need you guys. So any data that you have, that'll get added and aggregated anonymously to the average benchmark. Don't ask me to repeat that. As we get more participants, we'll increase segregation criteria. But look, only you can see your results against the benchmark. You can't see anyone else's results for obvious reasons, for privacy. Look, I'll be totally honest with you. I can see some of that data, but the only reason I'm doing that is to identify outliers. And even in this small participant group, we've had occasions where someone's left a 0 for their production figures, and I'm sitting there going, how have you used 400 kilowatts for 1 hectoliter of beer? That seems kind of excessive. Nickname it electric beer. So I'm just doing that purely for a data preservation area. So it just means that I can give you a call up and say, hey, do you want to just check your figure in April and see what was going on there? So that's pretty much what I'm doing with it right now. So, and again, if you've got any questions, my email address is on the tool itself. So if you run into any problems, and likewise, I'd love to get more feedback. So if there's something you would like to see in the tool, just let us know. At the moment we're looking at things like electricity, water, gas, CO2 from packaged CO2, but there's so much more things we could have there. Like, it only takes a couple of minutes to do a calculation, have an automated carbon report, so you can see what your carbon performance is per month. You can see what your waste is, how much waste you're generating, if you've improved over time. And there's a reporting section at the back of this tool. It's very basic at the moment, but with your input and your feedback, see what we can do with it. So look, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you on a real run through of this tool. I've literally just opened this up on my screen, but I want you guys to see that this is fairly simple. The hardest part, and we will talk about this, is about collecting the data. And in the sustainability guide, we talk about ways to make that data collection a little bit more simple. So let me just share my screen now. Can everyone see that okay? Just let me know verbally. Head, yes, shake. Cool, perfect. All right, cool. So let me just move a few things around, please. Okay. So this is going to be a real example. So all I've done is log into the website, which is iba.2xe.com.au. So I think, Kylie, we're going to have this as a link directly from the IBA, which will get straight into the platform. So what we're going to do is start from the very start. We're going to register a business. Let's just make something up at random. Hopefully I haven't used this before. We're going to call it Bob's Brewers. Let's make sure this works. And I'll probably hit the wrong password. No, it works. Perfect. Wonderful. Okay, I haven't used that email address before. So the first thing you'll see that comes up is a disclaimer. So all we want to do is just make sure that you're aware that we're using this data to calculate your performance and compare your performance against other industry benchmarks. And look, your data is going to be anonymously aggregated with other breweries to improve that benchmark. So if you're happy with that, just click on accept. So let me just get to the first thing. So as we go through, this is your loading page. This is your start page. So all we're going to do is create your brewery. And again, this is going to be how fast it is to work on it. So Bob's Brews, address, won't worry about that. We're going to assume it's in South Australia. And we're going to assume that this is in a metro area, and we're producing about 250,000 litres per annum. Now, all of this data that we've got across here, we're using a little bit for segregation, but at the moment we want to try and use more segregation. So it isn't impacted now. So we've got solar capacity. So comparing others with other breweries with sizes that are similar to yours, that's one of the things we're going to look at. And similar, we've got electric versus gas breweries. Trying to do it's basically trying to get more and more segregation. So we're going to assume that this is a gas brewery. It's running on natural gas. Yes, we package on site. These guys don't have a venue, no trade water system. They're running a standard refrigerant. Not doing glass anymore. They're doing 80% by volume cans and keg 20%. That would have been quite a different story not that long ago. We're going to assume that there's a 100 kilowatt KWP solar system. A yes to cardboard recycling, no to plastic recycling, and yes to bottle and cans. That's it. This is now registered. So if we save this, again, I just want to reiterate, this information is here purely for divisions and segregation in the future. So it's not in effect now for a lot of it, but if we can start collecting this data now, it'd be a good step. And again, as I get feedback from you guys, if there's more things that you want to add in here, just let me know. Okay. So we've now got that baseline created. Now what we're going to do is just go to the last month that we've got. So we're going to assume it's December now, so we'll choose November. So let me just bring up my next screen. Now I've created some values that are based on sort of real values for a brewery about this size. just so we can get some actual real results from it. So we're going to assume that we're getting, and I'm going to talk to you about data collection as I go through this because I think this is important. So hopefully you've got monthly brew schedules and you know what your package volume is per month. That's going to be critical. So this is basic data collection. So we're going to save that at 25,000 liters for the month of November. So this is just for November. So we'll save those changes. We'll go to the next section here, and electricity. How much electricity do we use in this time? So not that much, that's a bit too much. So 17.5 kilowatt hours. Now, how do you get this data? Well, hopefully you can get a monthly electricity bill from your electricity provider. Now, if you don't, if they're aggregated into 1 or 2 months during summer and then 6 months during winter, go back to your energy supplier and just say, hey, I'd like to have this monthly. Because seriously, I've worked with other wineries in the past who they're getting electricity bill and they have no idea what's happening, and it's frustrating the hell out of them. So go back to your supplier and say, I want this better. Now, in this case, we're going to assume the cost is about $3,500, which is a fairly exorbitant price, but fairly standard. And again, if you want to save money fairly quickly, the first thing to do is go back to your supplier and say, excuse me, I'd like to have a better deal than that. If they don't, find someone else. Likewise, if you want to get some green power put into there as well and decrease your carbon footprint, do that too.
So James, if you're wanting to use this tool and you only had, let's say, electricity bills every 3 months, and you obviously were waiting for a response to break that down to a monthly cycle, you could always divide it by 3 just so you could get your data into the tool, correct?
Yeah, you can do that. It's definitely a case that if you can divide it. It's not going to be perfect. There's actually a better way that you can do it, which is far more complex but more accurate, where you get your NMI data or your interval meter data, and you do it that way. It takes a little bit of time. If you want, give me a call. I can talk you through it. But yeah, to go back to your question, Matisse, yes, you can divide it by 3 just to get a rough value to start off with.
And you can always come back and change it later when you do get something more accurate.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think, if I can just jump in as well, I think
please.
You're talking to this, but just going through. Yes, we've talked about the purpose of trying to get trends and benchmark across the industry and all these outputs that we want to create. But just going through this exercise of looking at what was my data for this month and how much did it cost, and what was my data for the next month and how much did it cost, I've found has been hugely valuable, because I've been able to get a real understanding of water use and how that changes over production volumes, electricity and how that changes over seasons, and just get a good understanding of how our business and brewery operates, which is super valuable just in and of itself, let alone the other outputs that James is going to talk us through.
Yeah, James, I totally agree with you on that. And as I was saying when we were offline, I was working with another company that assumed that their annual energy and gas bill was $100,000 per year for each of them, and it was only when he gave me a call back about 2 days later and said, yeah, it's changed a little bit since I looked at it last time. It's now $500,000 for gas and $500,000 for electricity. So that's probably a bit different there. Okay, so yeah, no, thank you, James. That's there. It's very, very important. So I'll continue through the tool here. So this is monthly data, and again, I'll talk to you about how we sort of collect this data. So we're looking at the solar generation over the past month. So we're going to assume that that's about 3,000 kilowatt hours. Now, how do you find out how much solar you've generated? Well, again, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can either, if you look on your bill, it's not going to tell you how much your solar system produced. It's not going to tell you how much it necessarily offset. It'll tell you how much it exported back to the grid, which is good, but you don't really want to be exporting it back to the grid. You want to be using it on site. So where you do get this information is a lot of times you can get this data direct from your inverter or online portals. Online portals tend to be the better bet, but they can tell you how much electricity the system generated, how much it offset from your own generation. But I'll talk about that more in a minute. Now we'll go over to water. So how much water do we use in the month of November? So we'll assume that's 200,000 litres, which is, sadly, it's not that uncommon. So, it's a ratio of about 8 to 1. All that comes back down to cleaning practices. So this is at a low cost of $540, which doesn't seem that much, but it's a greater impact than what a lot of people realize. LPG. So if you remember, we decided not to use LPG. This brewery's got running natural gas, so we'll come over to that one. CO2. Again, this can be a bit of a trickier one. Sorry, one thing that I will point out is that this calculator, this platform does all the, it'll do all the conversions. So 1,000 kilograms of CO2 is 986 liters of CO2. Likewise, if we put it to that one, it'll increase the value. So the calculations happen automatically. Getting data for CO2 is a little bit trickier. That one is, as Martise was saying before, is you probably have to take an average because the delivery times are not always consistent, unless you're really cluey and you've got flow meters on certain areas. So natural gas, we're going to assume 2,000 cubic meters at 76,000 megajoules. It comes up with your automatic calculation, and we're going to assume about $2,000. So if we save those changes and go to our homepage, hey, cool, that worked. Doing this sort of things live is always quite, I've done this probably a dozen times, but you always just this nice little thought in the back of your head that goes, God, I hope nothing goes wrong. But it hasn't gone wrong for quite some time. So ever since we've had lots of fixes. So this is what we get as a result of this. So what can we see? This is our benchmark data right here and our performance metrics. So from the get-go, this is telling us that our electricity is 70 kilowatt hours per hectoliter. Water use is 8 liters per liter. Natural gas, CO2, etc. Now, in this area that we're looking at, naturally you can see we've got a couple of different areas. So orange is really the average value at the moment. Green is when you're performing better than average. Red is something that you probably need a bit of improvement for. So let's talk about this as a start. So CO2, again, this comes down to a personal preference about how much a brewery is going to be flooding a tank before it gets used. Natural gas related back to a boiler. If you're highly efficient with your boiler, then your gas is going to be better than average. Water comes down to cleaning practices, plain and simple. And again, just taking it from, or what I've seen in both the brewing industry and wine industry, is this value can vary so much depending on how people are actually doing their cleaning. Even within breweries of almost identical sizes, identical wash regimes. One's using a high pressure hose with blasted and recycling water. The other one isn't. And you end up with some quite different values. What I've seen in both the brewing industry and wine industry is this value can vary so much. So the other one that we're looking at is total electricity. Doing their cleaning. Even within breweries. So with total electricity, we're looking at something that's a little bit different here. So we're slightly high for electricity and slightly high for the grid. So what can we do about that?
YouTube open, James?
Not me, but it's someone. I'm getting someone's feedback along the place.
Yeah, I think it's someone running YouTube at the same time.
Okay. Just going to close it. No, not me. Is anyone else running YouTube in the background? Doing their cleaning. Even within breweries. So with total electricity, we're looking at... Oh, this is getting bad. Different here. So just give us half a second just till we get this nailed, because I'm getting feedback. So what can we do about that?
YouTube open, James?
Not me, but it's someone. I'm getting someone's feedback. Oh, thank you. Don't know who that was, but thank you.
Listening to yourself, James.
I'm listening. It's like, how many times can I hear my voice over again? Okay, now I can focus again. All right. Where were we? Okay, so so for this particular brewery, we're running slightly high as far as electricity is concerned, and also slightly higher as far as solar is concerned. So this is what I was talking about as far as solar can sometimes bandage or hide a problem. So in this case, we're looking at... Oh, so am I getting feedback again? Okay, now I can focus again. All right. Where were we? Okay, so so for this particular brewery, getting that feedback again, so I'm not sure if anyone can put themselves on mute. And also slightly higher as far as solar is concerned. So this is what I was talking about as far as solar can sometimes bandage or hide a problem. So in this
the wonders of technology.
Yeah. Matisse, I'm just wondering, I think you're the only one who's not on mute. Do you want to give that a crack?
Yeah.
Wait. Okay, so for this particular brewery,
not you.
back again, so I'm not sure if anyone can.
Yep, it was coming through. Yeah, well, that's good. It seems to be working now. Let's keep with that one. Okay. All right. So one more time. So I'm just going to skip to the sustainability guide now. And one of the things we're looking at here is, we've got electricity is slightly high. So what can we do about it? Well, this is where we go to the sustainability guide. So I'm assuming we can all see that one. So this is the sustainability guide that Carly, you've done a wonderful job in designing. So thank you. Kelly, you've done a wonderful job in designing. So thank you very much for that. So what can we do? We've got high electricity. This is where we go into our guide and we start looking at what we can target next. So electricity efficiency, for example. If we go into this, it starts talking about where our uses are. So what's driving electricity use in my brewery? So it could be refrigeration, packaging. If you're not running packaging, then it's almost always going to be refrigeration. So refrigeration, unless you're running an electric brewery, tends to be your biggest consumer for electricity. Now, once we've identified that, then we start talking about what can we do about it. We've split all these sections up into two areas. One's optimizing equipment, and the other one is upgrading equipment. So optimizing equipment comes down to slight adjustments that you can do. It's usually little or no cost to implement and modest cost savings. Sometimes we've seen particularly large cost savings if a process hasn't been working too well. And when you come to upgrading equipment, this is more capital, but probably a more long-term investment and more a sustainability investment and growth planning project. So we start splitting into these areas. So we talk about refrigeration, which is the big one, brew house, compressed air, packaging, lighting, and I'm not going to go through all these details in this one, but likewise, if you had an issue with gas efficiency, what could you do there? Well, gas efficiency starts to talk about heat recovery from wet to mash, heat recovery from heat generation sources, and it just goes into more and more detail. One of the best ways I've found to identify heat loss in a process, in an open process, get a thermal camera. They're inexpensive and they're really cool. So if you want to get one of those, that's fantastic. You can see problems fairly quickly. You can see where you've got cold spots where things are not insulated, hot spots where things you're getting heat coming through. This is a classic example of hidden damage inside a cool room and losing thermal energy from that side. Likewise with water, what's driving water consumption in my brewery? Okay, so this is a typical flow pattern for a brewery that we did when we did some work with a couple of SA breweries about where water's going in the system. And all of these sort of details we end up in this system. Now, the hardest part for any of these is always going to be the first part, is how to collect data. It's bills, online portals, sub-meters, production systems, starting to get a little bit more expensive, EPA testing. So we go into details a lot about how you get this sort of information, because once you've collected that information, and as you can see, it's pretty clear. It's not too hard to enter the data in once you've got it, but it's just that collection. I think James, for some of your, well, for a lot of your systems, you had automatic SCADA collection points from memory, and that was one of the ways that you were running it. So, and we'll probably touch on that later. But the other one is this guide talks about things like energy procurement. This is a classic one as we get more and more breweries coming online. Electricity tends to be incredibly expensive in the afternoon. Off peak, it's pretty much dead. So what can you do to optimize the use of this system here? Can you overchill your glycol system during off peak times? And there are now quite a few ways of automated systems that you can use to optimize your cooling regimes so that you're maximizing off peak use and minimizing peak use and saving yourself some money. And wholesale market, as far as electricity prices, when you go to your retailer, they can be all over the place. You go to your retailer, go to the market, and find out the best deal that works for you guys. So, and renewable energy as well. So we talk about solar systems. Solar systems are great. What you don't want is an oversized solar system, as you can see on this page, where we're exporting a lot of electricity back to the grid because that's just a waste. And an undersized one, it's still good. It helps you, but not as much as one that's ideally suited to your size. So something where export is absolute minimal, and you can use the bulk of your electricity in the middle of the day for that system. So there are a couple of real examples. So that's the guide in a nutshell. So the guide, basically the tool, you can use the tool to figure out what your performance is, and then use the guide to help identify where you can make changes and how you can make improvements.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in as well,
please.
The guide has been set up, as James said before, every brewery is different. Every brewery's operations are different. Every different region is different. So the guide, it's impossible to put together a guide of this is what every brewery should do, because all the contexts are different, whether you're a regional metro. The guide has been set up to just help, I guess, ask questions and help the user to understand a bit more about that that area. So if you're putting your data and water is out, you can go to the water section of the guide, and it won't tell you exactly everything you need to do to get your water down. It'll ask you questions. It'll go, how are you purchasing water? How are you using water? Where are the typical sources of water use in a brewery? And gives you some guidance as to where you can dig into your own situation. So it's not by any means a guide on this is what everyone needs to do, but it's more of a tool, a complement to the benchmarking tool to allow you to do your own investigation.
Yeah, and there are so many resources out there if you do start looking, and so many, I guess, other businesses and entities that are happy to help in one, showing you how to collect your data, then interpret it, and then make some decisions. And I guess this tool helps us as a brewery put in the basic numbers and give you that starting point. I think the impetus for the majority of breweries is that you do want to do better in how you produce. But the key, I guess, is getting that data first up, popping it in something, and then helping you find a pathway to the next set of questions to make some of those changes within your business or processes to get those efficiencies that people are looking for. Excellent. Did you have anything else, James, that you wanted to run through in regards to Toolbox, the toolkit?
No, other than I'm hoping that it's fairly that people find it fairly easy to use. That was probably one of the biggest focus points, is not to create something that's extremely complicated. James Perrin and myself and others, as we went out, we had probably a few too many things to analyze first up, and we thought, no, we really want to get people to access it and start using it straight away. And so that's what we looked at. And so there's actually a whole heap of hidden collection fields in the background that we can just enable with a click of a button if you guys want it, but let's get people started on it first.
And the one other thing is that, building on that, is that there are reports that tool can put out as well. They're also in very early stage because the data is quite limited at the moment, but the more and more breweries that are putting in their data, then you can hit that reports page and see not only how you've trended over time, so you've got those monthly snapshots with those dials, but you can see how you're trending over month by month over the year. And then as enough breweries input their data and we get a good enough set, we can actually run reports on where your brewery sits compared to other breweries of similar size.
Absolutely. So one of the key drivers, obviously, entities behind this project in the very beginning was Giza. So I just wanted to bring in Oliver just to discuss, I guess, a little bit of some of the examples that you come across in the space that you work in relation to how this tool has been developed and how it could benefit some of those situations. Still on mute, Oliver.
Perfect. Sorry, happens all the time. Yeah, thanks, Matisse. Calling in from Adelaide here. I just want to first acknowledge and pay respect to the Kaurna people as the custodians of the land where I live and work, and also extend that respect to the any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who might be attending from other parts of Australia today. It's great to see this tool being launched today. I think it's been a long journey, and we're really happy with where it's come to, and really proud to be supporting it as well. Green Industries SA, or GISA, as we like to call ourselves, are a South Australian state government agency that essentially exists with the objective of reducing waste. Our work has enabled SA to become a leader in resource recovery and the circular economy, which is this idea that we can do business in a way where we keep products and materials in use for as long as possible. We regenerate the natural environmental systems around us, and we cut down and eliminate waste and pollution in the first instance. My team in the business sustainability program are a small agile team of project managers who really know sustainability. And we work with businesses directly and through industry groups like IBA to help them accelerate that change towards sustainability and realize the benefits that can bring. We understand businesses, and we know how to help them cut down on wasted energy, wasted water, wasted input materials or ingredients, and deliver financial savings and higher profitability to their products and service. Yeah, so really proud to have partnered on this project with IBA and with 2XE. As everyone said, this benchmarking tool and resource and better use guide is going to be really important resource for brewers to use to improve their environmental performance and improve their profitability. The benchmarking tool really builds that transparency and feedback into the process, as well as being able to track and measure your own environmental performance. And one theme that James has touched on, you don't know what you're not measuring, and you can't manage what you're not measuring. And it's only through measuring it and managing it that you can make those changes. So this is a really important way to capture that information, understand your processes, and make positive changes that will improve your performance and improve your profitability. In addition to the tool, obviously the guide will give you all the information you need to start asking those questions, start making sustainable changes, and adopting that best practice when it comes to the efficient use of resources. The two together will really help your business sort of operate in a really environmentally positive way and improve that profitability. I think it can help by adopting these changes and moving towards that environmental responsible production and sharing that journey. You can really build your brand identity and give brewers a competitive advantage in the market while continuing to produce that premium quality beer for your dedicated customer base. The indie brewing industry is obviously full of really innovative people who don't mind taking a punt on something new and who are passionate about their communities and doing business in a sustainable way. That's why it's really great to see these first two pieces of the IBA Sustainability Resource Library, a result of the hard work from the Sustainability Group and the IBA more broadly, and 2XE as well, go live today. And I'm really pumped to be able to see, well, in particular, to see some of our SA breweries really jump on board and start using these tools and seeing the benefits. Because, like as you said, we've seen I've experienced examples in plenty of other industries as well, who start this journey. They really need to track their performance, understand where their energy is being used and where their water is being used and where their input materials are being used before they can prioritize their investment, make those changes, and see those benefits. We've worked with We're a Winery, which is a winery here in SA, and they started through sort of getting to understand their energy use, and they went through a long journey of tracking and wanting to improve their carbon performance and also their electricity generation. So they made some upgrade investments into improving their refrigeration plant and line insulation on all that refrigeration lines as well. And they invested in a 100 kilowatt solar system. And through doing that, they were able to bring their CO2 emissions overall down by like 60%, and their electricity consumption down by half, and saved $50,000 per year for their business, which means, they can still make quality wine, or in your case, still make quality beer, but just make a little bit more money, spend less money making that beer and make a bit more profit on each individual bottle, essentially.
And I should reiterate there too, Oliver, it's the example that you give there is they're obviously a fairly large scale entity in operation. What we're doing here is being able to be applied to businesses small, medium, and large, and that's
Absolutely.
really something to get across here. Even if you're only turning over smaller volumes of beer or wine every year, there's still marginal gains to be had in understanding your data and tweaking your business process to come out at the other end in better shape.
Absolutely, and this tool really gives you the means to do that, because we find working with a lot of small, medium enterprises, they just don't have the resources in front of them, the tools to actually do that tracking and measurement, and they're really time poor. Having this from the IBA is really going to empower those guys to be able to track it pretty regularly, which is great for the small guys.
Mm-hmm. So with the in the guide that we've put out today, you'll also notice there's a number of case studies. One of the ones covered is, as Oliver's alluded to, the Wira Wira example. Bright Brewery's also got a case study in there. As a business, obviously working for Bright Brewery, one of our core values is sustainability, and we very much do focus on that within both the venue and also the manufacturing environment. I know, having dealt with James for a while now, that Stone & Wood have been very big in this space. Did you want to touch on some of those sustainability practices in large part that you focused on over your time there?
Yeah, and it's started with a similar journey. We just didn't have a tool like this, but it really, to be honest, just started with tracking our water, electricity, gas, starting to develop a baseline on that. Like I said, it was a big old dirty Excel sheet for us to start with, and try to improve year on year on where we were at and compare ourselves to other, sometimes other breweries put out reports, and we just kind of grabbed what other numbers we could find to benchmark ourselves. And that was a range of things, some of which is in the guide, things like looking at our cleaning practices, things like looking at our wastewater treatment practices, things like doing upgrades on our gas boilers. We got a few government grants over the years, energy audits, things like that. Really, what we did was first understand where we were, I guess, falling behind. So when we first started, our gas usage was probably the most out of benchmark compared to what else we could find. And so that led us down that avenue of going, okay, well, let's look at that at a deeper level. Let's do an energy audit. Let's start to get some help and understand where our gas usage is, why it's really high, and drive that down. And just over the years, it's just the other thing I'll say about this, and what I was trying to say when James was walking us through inputting the data, is that a really important piece to this is consistency. And it's going to be really hard for some businesses because, it's a bit of extra work. You got to put your data in, but you get out what you put in, and you get so much more value as you do it over time. Mm-hmm. So, just logging on once a year and backdating all your data and having a look at it, well, that's interesting, but it's only through doing it every month consistently and then looking at it over time that you'll build a trend, and you'll get a really deep understanding on where your resources are being used in your brewery and how you can improve upon them, not only for sustainability but for cost. So it really starts there. It starts with our brewery usage, and once we can get a good handle on that and good understanding on that, then Stone & Wood, anyway, we've started to look a bit more external and a bit more industry wide or supplier initiatives. But we really needed to get a strong, solid understanding of our own resource use first, and then we added in things like recycling practices, and we added in things later. But that, just like that foundational water, electricity, gas, waste, those are just foundational for brewers.
Now, I think that that's very key as well, James. You mentioned that those starting points are the beginning of a greater discussion around sustainability practices within our industry as a whole. I think if we collectively can target some of these things and just have a better understanding of what impact our businesses have on the environment, then the IBA as a collective can really make some big leaps and bounds in the space of being more environmentally considerate to the environment. So, absolutely. I know from a Bright Brewery perspective, once again, we treat the venue and manufacturing space as two different entities. But even from a venue perspective, not doing takeaway coffees anymore, not using straws. In a manufacturing environment, we give our spent grain to cattle farmers to feed their cows, and just making sure our trade waste is as clean as it can be. Using our malt bags to do roadside waste collections and things like that. I mean, they're all little things, but collectively they all, we believe, make a greater contribution to the sustainability effort as a business. So, all right, I think we're sort of drawing to a close. We've had a good discussion today, so thank you to everybody for their input. We've had a couple of questions on the chat, and James, thanks for some of the responses there. Just to all our viewers that have logged in, if you want to get access to the benchmarking tool and the best practices guide, if you log into the IBA website with your username and password, go to the sustainability page, you'll see there's a link there that allows you to then link in to the benchmarking tool, and you can create your profile and start entering data. And obviously the sustainability guide is a link there that you can view and or download or save as you wish. And once again, we should reiterate that these documents are fluid. We can add to them, we can edit them. So any feedback you have for us as a sustainability group, please feel free to get in touch with myself. And any questions or extra advice on directional changes or additional things to input, always welcomed and taken on board. So yeah, we're recording the presentation as well, which is available in the members area. So if you have got something out of today and you'd like to share the link with someone else so that they can log on and have a listen, it's always much appreciated. And yeah, share the knowledge, share the wealth, share the experience, and collectively we can all do better as an association. So thank you everyone for joining in today. We appreciate the time and effort. Thank you for our members that have logged in and asked some questions, and we appreciate your time today, and thanks for joining us. Sign off. Awesome. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.